Hi, this is John here. I'm in my incredibly messy office, and I'm going to try to start doing something a little bit new and see if you like it. What I'm doing is I have my Bible here, and I'm going to start working my way through a book of the Bible, and I'm just going to take little 3 or 4 minute snippets each day and just walk through the passage and see where we get. And if you find it beneficial, let me know in the comments. If you find it incredibly useless, let me know that in the comments as well, and we'll see what happens. So I am actually getting ready to begin teaching my way through the book of Romans for a Sunday school class at my church in the near future. So I've been spending a lot of time looking at Romans. So we're going to do that now. We're going to start going through the book of Romans, and you tell me what you think. So we're in Romans chapter 1, and we're just going to work through the first couple of verses today. I'm reading from an ESV Bible, but follow along in whatever version you have handy. It says this. It says, Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God. So introductions in the ancient world had a threefold pattern. When we're writing a letter to someone, we would normally say, dear so-and-so, how are you? And at the end of the letter, we'd say, sincerely, John, or whatever. So we would say who we're sending it to at the beginning, and who is actually doing the sending would be at the end of the letter. In the ancient world, they did it a little bit differently. The introduction to a letter would have 3 parts. It would have the person who was writing the letter first, followed by the person or people to whom the letter was being written, and then some kind of standard greeting. That would normally be the word "karain," greetings to you. Paul takes this form and twists it a little bit in his letters. He always uses some version of this form. He always starts by identifying himself. I'm Paul, and he'll give some kind of description of himself as well. And then he'll follow up with talking about who he's writing the letter to, and then he'll give a greeting, but again, he puts his own twist on it, which we'll see later. So here he says, Paul, he identifies himself. And then he uses 3 descriptions of himself in this very first verse. First of all, he calls himself a servant of Christ Jesus. That word servant there is the Greek word doulos, which means bondservant or slave. This was not a hired hand. This was not even an indentured servant. This is a slave that he's talking about. He describes himself as a slave of Christ Jesus. He is not free to do his own will. He is bound by his calling, by his salvation, to do what his Lord and Master tells him to do. Secondly, he says that he is called to be an apostle. Literally, those words "to be" are not in the Greek. It's literally called apostle or called as an apostle. Paul really holds his apostleship as a great gift. He's presenting his credentials here. He's saying, I'm an apostle. He was called to be an apostle. He was called on the Damascus road when God, knocked him off of his path of sin and off of his donkey or horse or whatever it was, I forget. But God calls him to be an apostle, a sent one. God is commissioning him to take his message of the gospel out to the world, and specifically to the Gentiles, whereas the other apostles were primarily focused in the Jewish world, in the Jewish communities. Paul was commissioned to take the gospel primarily to the Gentiles. So he was called to be an apostle. He is a slave of Jesus Christ. And third, he is set apart for the gospel of God. Set apart for the gospel of God. That word "set apart" there, think of a commissioning ceremony where you set someone apart. Nowadays we have ordination services where we commission or ordain someone into the gospel ministry. This is the same kind of thing here. Paul is commissioned. He has been set apart for the gospel of God. What has he been set apart to do? He's been set apart to proclaim not his own message, but the gospel message, the gospel of God. And in verses 2 and following, he's going to tell us what that gospel, what that good news consists of. And we'll pick that up tomorrow. See you then.